This weekend, the first AFL draw, F1 records broken, and an NRL feel-good story that was 3 years in the making. That's all coming up on your Monday wrap-up. Welcome to the Sports Playbook. I'm Daniel. Here's everything that happened in sport this weekend on this week's Monday wrap-up. In AFL, the first draw of 2026 was Collingwood against Hawthorn. It was the first draw between either of these clubs in their entire history, with Hawthorn kicking a goal after the siren to make it a draw, 93 apiece. The Adelaide Derby was an absolute classic. With 50 seconds left on the clock, Port Adelaide hit the front, scoring a goal, and were 5 points ahead. That was until the Adelaide Crows player Brandon Cook delivered the hammer blow, scoring a goal to down Port Adelaide by 1 point in front of 53,000 people at the Adelaide Oval. In other games, Geelong got a convincing win over North Melbourne, and Fremantle now sit at the top of the ladder after they defeated a dangerous Western Bulldogs by 12 points. And Richmond snapped a 12-game losing streak to win their first game of the season against the West Coast Eagles by 11 points. And the Sydney Swans hit the top of the ladder after a convincing win over the Melbourne Demons. That's the Swans' 5th win in a row. In the NRL, the NRLW kicked off the round with the New South Wales Blues taking on the Queensland Maroons in Newcastle. In front of 20,000 fans, the New South Wales Blues won Game 1 of State of Origin, 11-6 in a tight contest. For the Blues, that's their first win in Newcastle, with Jess Surges scoring after the siren to add the cherry on top for the Blues' victory. And Game 1 of Women's State of Origin was the most watched game of rugby league this year, with over 2 million people tuning in nationally to watch the women play Game 1. And it also defeated the AFL time slot, which had Hawthorn against Collingwood. That's a massive achievement for the women. The Roosters almost got rolled by the Broncos. The Roosters at one point were up 30-0, and the Broncos clawed it back to 30-24. But the Roosters, they finished strong, 38-24, after Katoni Staggs, the Brisbane Broncos centre, got sin-binned for a foul play offence. But for the Sydney Roosters, this win did come with serious consequences. Mark Nwangawitawaze and Angus Crichton were injured throughout the match in a costly injury blow for the Sydney Roosters. And for the Newcastle Knights, they won a massive game against the Rabbitohs, 42-38. For Newcastle, they got out to a convincing lead of 28-10 before the Rabbitohs hit the lead through a Latrell Mitchell sideline conversion with 8 minutes to go. That was until the Newcastle Knights scored through some Dylan Brown excellence with only 4 minutes left in the game. And for the Penrith Panthers, they stopped the Manly Seagulls winning streak under new coach Kieran Foran. Penrith won 18-16. And for Kieran Foran, until that game, he had the best new coach winning streak in the NRL in its history. Formula One, it has returned to Miami after a 5-week hiatus. This was the second sprint weekend of the year, and Lando Norris secured the sprint pole with Kimi Antonelli in P2 and Oscar Piastri in P3. Even George Russell, the Mercedes superstar, was surprised that Ferrari and McLaren had caught up as far as they had in this 5-week break, where the Bahrain and Saudi Arabia Grand Prix were cancelled. And in the sprint, Lando Norris from the pole took the win over Oscar Piastri and Charles Leclerc in third position. And in qualifying for the Grand Prix, Kimi Antonelli secured his third pole position in a row. Kimi Antonelli, he made history alongside Ayrton Senna and Michael Schumacher. The history is all three of these drivers had their first 3 pole positions in successive races, a massive achievement for Kimi Antonelli in only his second season in Formula One. Max Verstappen had a massive qualifying, finishing P2, and he will start on the front row of the grid alongside Charles Leclerc. As we record this podcast, it's currently Sunday at 9 p.m, so the results will not be on this podcast today. However, the race is at 3 a.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Saving Time. But the big thing to note here is 4 teams in qualifying. The top 4 were all different teams in a massive result for Formula One as they look to come to terms with these new regulations. And in football, the Women's Champions League semi-final was on between Lyon and Arsenal, with Lyon defeating Arsenal 4-3 on the aggregate total. As this podcast is currently being recorded, Lyon will either face Bayern Munich or Barcelona as they had their second leg early on Monday morning. In that game between Bayern Munich and Barcelona, their aggregate total is 1-1 apiece. So whoever scores the most goals will go on to face Lyon in the Champions League final. And in the men's in the English Premier League, Ipswich Football Club got promoted back into the Premier League. This is a special moment for this club as they got relegated after the 24-25 season. And guess who is a minority owner in Ipswich Football Club? That would be Ed Sheeran, who has invested a lot of money into this club. So a massive moment for Ipswich Football Club. In netball, the Melbourne Mavericks are cementing their status as final contenders as they defeated the New South Wales Swifts 62-60 in a massive result for the Melbourne Mavericks. And this is because they finally got one over on the New South Wales Swifts, who defeated the Mavericks at the start of the year. For the Adelaide Thunderbirds, they also took on the Queensland Firebirds, and they snuffed out the Firebirds, defeating them 73-49 in a convincing victory. For the West Coast Fever, they've also solidified third position on the ladder with a 57-52 win against the Sunshine Coast Lightning, who had their chances throughout this game to win this match. And the Melbourne Vixens also remain undefeated after 8 games of Suncorp Super Netball. But the Giants gave them a massive scare, with the Vixens still winning 66-64. And in athletics, Australia continues to elevate their athletic status. In the men's relay for the 4x100, they have secured their spot in the final. And also in the 4x400 men's relay, they have also qualified for a final spot. These finals will be taking place early on Monday morning post this podcast being recorded. And unfortunately, in the women's 4x100 meter relay, they were disqualified due to an illegal baton change. However, for the women, they will have their second chance to get into the final. That will be happening after this podcast is being recorded. That is the weekend results roundup. And now it's time to head into our main story deep dive. And it's in the NRL, and in particular, the New South Wales Blues, who have over 1,000 games of experience on the sideline through injury as the New South Wales Blues head into Game 1 of State of Origin. Currently, we are less than 3.5 weeks away from Game 1 of Men's State of Origin, and the New South Wales Blues are having issues before the team has even been selected. Some of those names include Payne Haas, Jacob Carraz, Max King, Tom Trbojevic, Mark Nwangawitawaze, Mitch Kenny and Liam Martin. All these names were in serious contention for New South Wales Blues spots, and what it looks like is they are all likely to miss Game 1 through injury. For the New South Wales Blues, these are massive blows, and there's only 2 games left before the Men's State of Origin teams get picked for the May 27th Game 1. For the New South Wales Blues, they haven't won a series since 2024. However, they do have lots of depth in all of those positions. So whilst there's a lot of players on the sideline through injury, Laurie Daly will have plenty of talent to choose the best team to face the Queensland Maroons on May 27th. Every week, I'll call out one athlete who has made us stop and pay attention. That's either in men's or women's sport. And this week, that goes to Cody Ramsey in the NRL, who's returned to professional rugby league. For Ramsey, he has not played professional rugby league since 2022, and that's due to medical reasons. Ramsey has suffered through ulcerative colitis, in which he lost 30 kilos, but that did not stop Cody Ramsey, who was at the St George Dragons when this prognosis was given to him. He's waited over 1,000 days to get his shot for professional rugby league, and he stepped back onto a football field. And for Cody, he ran 77 metres in the Sydney Roosters win against the Brisbane Broncos. So well done to Cody Ramsey for this amazing effort. You are the Sports Playbook standout performer for the week. And as we look at the state of play, things are interesting across all codes. In the AFL, the Sydney Swans sit on top of the ladder with 28 points and are equal with the Fremantle Dockers. Hawthorn sit in third, followed by the Brisbane Lions. The Geelong Cats and the Melbourne Demons round out the top 6. We look to the NRL. The Penrith lead from the Warriors, the Roosters and the Rabbitohs, who round out the top 4. The Tigers sit in 5th position, followed by the Cowboys, Manly and Sharks, who round out the top 8. And when we look to netball, the Melbourne Vixens continue to lead after they're undefeated after 8 rounds, followed by the Adelaide Thunderbirds, the West Coast Fever and the Melbourne Mavericks, who round out the top 4. So that was the Sports Playbook Monday wrap-up. On Thursday, I'll be back with this week's big stories and everything coming up on this weekend. So follow the Sports Playbook. We are your go-to for fast sport news without the noise. You can follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. See you next time.